The Russian pilots thought they were untouchable. At 45,000 feet, cruising near the edge of Estonian airspace, 3 Mig-31 Foxhounds believed nothing could touch them. Their cockpits were calm, the radio chatter casual, until suddenly, everything changed. Warning lights flared, screens turned red, and alarms shrieked in their ears. Out of nowhere, their radar showed incoming threats they couldn't see. And then, like ghosts materializing in the sky, NATO fighters revealed themselves. The Russians had walked straight into an ambush so precise it would leave them humiliated without a single shot being fired. What the MiG-31 crews didn't realize was that their every move had already been mapped, tracked, and locked. NATO wasn't scrambling to react. NATO was patiently waiting, preparing, setting the perfect trap. This wasn't going to be another polite escort back to Russian airspace. This was something far more calculated, and far more dangerous, because in just a matter of minutes, the so-called invincible MiG-31 would discover its greatest weakness. But to understand how the world's fastest fighter found itself cornered, we need to go back to the beginning, when the Russians first launched their mission, confident that nothing could stop them. It all began at Shilov's air base. 3 MiG-31 Foxhounds roared off the runway, climbing like missiles straight into the sky. Within minutes, they were at 45,000 feet, pushing east toward Estonian airspace. To the Russian pilots, this wasn't combat, it was theater. Their transponders were off, their formation was aggressive, and their plan was simple. Provoke NATO, then return home as heroes. They believed they were untouchable. The MiG-31 could outrun almost anything, flying nearly 3 times the speed of sound and reaching altitudes where no F-16 could follow. At that height, they felt like kings of the sky. They joked on the radio, convinced the only response would be the usual. A couple of NATO jets scrambling, a quick escort, and then the story would be spun back home as proof of Russian dominance. But beneath that confidence was a fatal miscalculation. The Russians assumed they understood NATO's playbook. What they didn't realize was that NATO wasn't about to follow the old script. This time, every second inside Estonian airspace only drew them deeper into a carefully designed trap. And waiting silently for the perfect moment was NATO's command center, watching, tracking, and preparing to strike. From the moment those MiG-31s left Russian soil, alarms lit up inside NATO's combined air operations center in Germany. On the massive screens, the Foxhounds were marked in red, high-priority targets. Normally, this would trigger an immediate scramble. Fighters in the air, quick intercept, polite warning. But not this time. Instead, the order was cold, deliberate, and unlike anything the Russians expected. Let them come. Every kilometer the MiGs flew deeper into Estonian airspace was another piece of evidence. Another layer in NATO's plan. It wasn't hesitation, it was patience, calculated down to the second. The Russian pilots thought NATO's silence meant weakness. They mocked the lack of response, laughing on their radios, convinced they'd embarrassed the alliance. But what they didn't know was that NATO's silence was the sound of a trap snapping shut. Because waiting on the ground were jets designed to make the MiG-31 obsolete before it even knew it was under threat. And when they finally took off, they did so without the Russians noticing a thing. What the MiGs couldn't see, what they couldn't even imagine, was that the hunters were already in the sky. 80 kilometers southwest of the Russian formation, the air was deceptively quiet. Then, with no warning, 2 F-35-A Lightning IIs lifted from a Mari air base in Estonia. To radar, they were ghosts. No signal, no emissions, nothing to betray their climb. The MiG-31s had no idea they were being stalked. Flying in complete electronic silence, the F-35s moved like predators in the shadows. Their sensors, however, were wide awake. In low probability of intercept mode, their radars recorded every detail of the Foxhounds: speed, altitude, engine heat, even the faintest blip of communication. All of it streamed directly into NATO's network, creating a perfect digital copy of the Russian formation in real time. But the MiGs were blind to it. Their older warning receivers couldn't detect the invisible beams sweeping across them. To the Russian pilots, the skies seemed empty. In reality, they were already being boxed in, every movement catalogued, every weakness exposed. The F-35s weren't alone either. Another set of hunters was sliding into position, ready to do something far more devastating than just watch. Because the next move wouldn't just track the MiGs, it would cripple them completely. While the MiG-31s pressed deeper into Estonian airspace, two more fighters quietly slid into the theater, Sweden's JS-39 Gripen-E. To the Russians, they didn't exist. Their radars stayed dark, their approach masked by NATO's network. But through Link 16, the Gripens saw everything the F-35s saw. It was as if the stealth jets had loaned them their eyes. The Gripen-E was no ordinary fourth-generation fighter. Built specifically with Russian threats in mind, it carried an electronic warfare suite capable of turning enemy cockpits into chaos. Its mission was simple: blind the MiGs, jam their systems, and force them into total dependence on outdated instincts. From the command center in Germany, the single word came down: engage. Instantly, the Swedish jets shifted into attack posture. Their Raven radars lit up, locking onto the Russian Foxhounds while their jammers began weaving invisible static across every Russian frequency. And the MiG pilots, still convinced NATO was asleep, were about to learn just how wrong they were. Because the moment the Gripens made their move, the Russians' world inside the cockpit would collapse. Then the sky inside the MiG cockpits stopped behaving like sky and started behaving like a nightmare. Screens filled with random blips. Radar returns smeared into junk. Instruments stuttered. Static swallowed voices. For a heartbeat, they thought it was a glitch, until their warning lights screamed and the RWR began howling with locks they couldn't place. Everything the pilots relied on, their sight, their sensors, their radio, was suddenly compromised. The Gripens had not only hidden, they had weaponized silence. Jamming and deceptive signals turned accurate data into false friends, making every readout useless. The MiGs were flying blind inside their own instruments. At the same time, the Meteors were already finding firing solutions through the network feed. Not a single Gripen needed a visual contact. The missile seekers were cued by linked sensors, and the no-escape zone closed like a vice. The crew in each MiG watched icons multiply on their threat displays, multiple high-priority locks, all converging. Panic replaced bravado. What had started as a provocation became an electronic autopsy. NATO wasn't aiming to shoot. It was demonstrating control. The MiGs were no longer hunters. They were targets, seen, catalogued, and stripped of every advantage they had ever trusted. And then, over the emergency channel, a calm voice cut through the chaos with one chilling order. Through the storm of alarms and static, a single voice broke in, calm, steady, almost cold. Russian fighter jets, you are in NATO airspace. Your systems are under our control. Multiple missiles are locked on your position. You have one option: turn back immediately. For the MiG-31 crews, it was the moment every illusion shattered. Their radars were blind. Their radios jammed. Their cockpits glowed with threat locks from every direction. And outside their windows, two Gripens calmly cruised into view, wingtip pylons bristling with Meteor missiles already armed and tracking. The Russian pilots froze. They had trained for speed, for intercepts at impossible altitudes, but never for this. No missile had been fired, yet the message was unmistakable. NATO owned every inch of the sky. When they finally tried to report back to Russian ground control, the only order they heard was desperate and humiliating. Turn back. Turn back immediately. And with that, the so-called invincible Foxhounds wheeled east in retreat, like predators suddenly realizing they were prey. But the retreat wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a brutal truth. The MiG-31's legendary reputation was built on weaknesses NATO had now exposed for the world to see. On paper, the MiG-31 looks terrifying. It can reach speeds over Mach 2.8, climb to the edge of space, and carry some of the longest-range missiles in the world. For decades, it was painted as the ultimate air defense interceptor, an aircraft that could destroy intruders before they even knew it was there. But the truth is less glamorous. The MiG-31 was designed in the late Cold War, built for a world of giant bomber formations flying predictable paths. It was never meant to face modern networked fighters that fight invisibly with sensors, jamming, and long-range data fusion. Its radar is powerful but clumsy, making it a glowing beacon in the sky. Its massive frame is fast but not agile, and against weapons like the Meteor, speed means nothing when the missile can outthink and outlast you. Even Russia knows it. That's why so many MiG-31s today are museum pieces flying combat patrols, not cutting-edge fighters. They're held up as symbols of power, but symbols can't survive when exposed to real modern warfare. And what happened in that Baltic encounter wasn't just a warning to Russia, it was a message to the world. The age of brute force speed and brute force firepower is over. On paper, the MiG-31 looks terrifying. It can reach speeds over Mach 2.8, climb to the edge of space, and carry some of the longest-range missiles in the world. For decades, it was painted as the ultimate air defense interceptor, an aircraft that could destroy intruders before they even knew it was there. But the truth is less glamorous. The MiG-31 was designed in the late Cold War, built for a world of giant bomber formations flying predictable paths. It was never meant to face modern networked fighters that fight invisibly with sensors, jamming, and long-range data fusion. Its radar is powerful but clumsy, making it a glowing beacon in the sky. Its massive frame is fast but not agile, and against weapons like the Meteor, speed means nothing when the missile can outthink and outlast you. Even Russia knows it. That's why so many MiG-31s today are museum pieces flying combat patrols, not cutting-edge fighters. They're held up as symbols of power, but symbols can't survive when exposed to real modern warfare. And what happened in that Baltic encounter wasn't just a warning to Russia, it was a message to the world. The age of brute force speed and brute force firepower is over. The silent standoff over the Baltic was never about a dogfight. It was about sending a message. NATO didn't need to fire a single missile to prove its point. The skies now belong to those who can see without being seen, strike without being touched, and control the fight before the first shot is even fired. For Russia, the retreat of its Foxhounds was humiliating, but for the rest of the world, it was a glimpse of the future of aerial warfare. A future where old legends built on speed and brute power collapse against networks, stealth, and weapons that rewrite the rules of range. In that moment, the MiG-31 wasn't just beaten. It was exposed, reduced from a Cold War icon to a relic outclassed by aircraft built for an entirely different kind of war. And for every pilot, every commander watching the radar feeds that night, the lesson was undeniable. Dominance in the sky isn't about who flies fastest. It's about who controls the fight before the enemy even realizes they've already lost. Because in modern war, the most powerful weapon isn't speed or size. It's the silence that decides who survives. That night in the Baltic, no missiles launched, no wreckage fell. But the outcome was crystal clear. The MiG-31, once a feared predator, was revealed as prey in a sky it no longer understood. NATO didn't just intercept Russian jets. It rewrote the rules of air combat in real time. And this was only one clash. Around the world, rival powers are quietly testing each other every day. Stealth against speed, networks against brute force. Some of these encounters never make the news, but they decide the balance of power long before open war ever breaks out. So what happens when the next confrontation doesn't end with a retreat? When silence turns into the first shot of a new conflict? That's the question haunting every air force on the planet right now. If you found this story eye-opening, make sure you hit that like button so more people can see it. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because we're digging into even more hidden encounters, secret weapons, and shocking rivalries the world isn't supposed to know about. The story of the MiG-31 isn't just history, it's a warning. And trust me, what's coming next is even more shocking.